Welcome to episode 70 of The Route presented by Jobs and Sports. The Route is a glorified sports business coffee chat that has a new guest every episode. So every episode we interview someone new, and as always, we got someone for you today. But before we do that, just two quick things to cover. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. And if you're listening on one of the audio platforms, check us out on YouTube. We're now doing video content as well, so check that out. And the other thing I will say is social media. We have accounts on all platforms. So at The Route Sports, check us out there. And let's get into today's guest. So it's pretty cool. I've always wanted to chat with someone from Nike, and we have someone here today with us. So just wanted to introduce our guest. They are a brand defining and purpose marketing specialist, Juliette Bosscher. Welcome to The Route. How's it going?
Hey, Chris. I'm all good. Happy Friday.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks for joining us. Nothing too crazy here. The first real question I have for everyone is just, take us through your route. So where did you go to school and how did you get to where we are today?
Cool. Yeah. So I would say, I don't know about people in sports, but how their route usually goes, but I think mine was a bit random. So I went to school in London. I went to London College of Fashion and I actually studied fashion management. It was very like a business kind of management focused course with obviously more focus on the fashion industry in itself. I did that degree because I thought I wanted to end up working in luxury fashion, but then I think throughout the degree, I very quickly realized like this is really not for me. It doesn't really reflect my values, and it's just not what I want to do. So coming out of my degree, I was a bit lost, but I just applied for so many jobs, and one of them that I applied for was a job in the music industry. I actually got it. So for about a year, I worked at MTV, and what my job was basically setting up shoots with artists, with musicians, and kind of scouting out young talent in the UK and supporting them from the start. And it was honestly a dream job. It was so much fun. I think I got really lucky coming out of uni, where I got into a job that didn't feel like a job. I went really well. And then one day out of the blue, while I was at the office, I got a call from a really good friend of mine, and she was like, just so you know, I put your name forward for a role at Nike. And I was like, oh, okay. And then she said, would you like to be interviewed for it? But without even knowing what the role was, I was like, yeah, let's do it. So I got on a Zoom call, a Zoom call with someone in consumer and athlete insights. And it went so well, and I just got it. And just like that, I decided to leave my job in London and move to Amsterdam to start in athlete and consumer insights. And that was really, really fun as well. Actually, when I moved, the pandemic hit, so never got to start in the office. Started at Nike on Zoom. But what I did in Insights was is essentially in a way kind of trend forecasting and just having your pulse on what our athletes and what our consumers are thinking and feeling, and use those conversations and that research to define strategy for the future of the company. And then I moved to Jordan actually for a little while as well, doing insights. So I started at Nike in football, then moved into Jordan brand, and then a few roles came free, and I applied for a job in marketing for brand defining and purpose, and I got it, which is my dream job. And I've been there for a few months now. So I'm not that much of a Nike veteran yet, but it's been quite the journey.
No, that's super interesting. So I guess the first question I have, and we'll kind of go back to the beginning. Have you still not been to the office, or is it still all via Zoom?
All via Zoom. I've been to the actual campus. We call it campus. Probably 4 times. One time to pick up my devices, and it was obviously empty, just tech guys were there. Then a few times to pick up product samples, but I haven't felt the full atmosphere yet.
Yeah, no, that's pretty interesting. I know last year I was working with a club here, the soccer team, and coming out of school, all that, you're like, oh, I'm gonna enter sports industry, just be so cool working in the stadium. And then you realize it's all via Zoom. Everyone's kind of rolling out of bed. Everyone's kind of in their t-shirts, and who knows what they're wearing under the waist. And then that was kind of the experience, right? Obviously, I'd go to the stadium here and there, but kind of similar situation where you'd never feel that actual ambiance of that. But
yeah, I didn't build a relationship with these people,
yeah.
and like I only met my manager 5 months after I started.
Wow.
So yeah, it was really interesting, but we got really close regardless. So I'm really grateful for that.
You only met them in person or even via Zoom?
Oh yeah, in person. Obviously in Zoom like every day, but in person, yeah. 5 months in.
That makes a lot of sense. And I know now I just want to go back to maybe the beginning, then we kind of chat about different things as we go along. But you were talking about how you're in school in London, and then as always, everyone that comes out of school, you're like, oh, like what do I do now, right? And you apply to a bunch of jobs, and I know I did the same because I think I went to an event, and someone said, yeah, if you want to get in sports or a specific niche field, it's very hard. So it's almost a numbers game. So I did something similar, and I had an accounting background. So I created an Excel sheet and I tracked all of it. And I think I got to 100 because that was my goal. So I applied to 100 different companies all over the world. And it was very shocking how sometimes like the biggest companies like the Golden State Warriors, Head, like the ski company, those are the ones that got back. But then the small little teams in Canada junior hockey teams, they wouldn't got back. So I was curious how that application process went. Were you applying to everywhere or whatever interests you? How did that go?
Everywhere, anywhere and everywhere that would sort of fit my resume, and also just in random fields. So like little consultancy agencies, sports, luxury, even though I didn't really want to do luxury, but like startups in the luxury industry. Even applied to Ad Eagle. But yeah, MTV came along, which was like obviously in the music industry, and it came out of the blue, but I ended up loving it so much. And then I could eventually envision myself, staying long-term in the music industry. And then Nike came, and sports has always been a huge passion of mine, but I'm someone who has so many passions. So I think that's for our generation. We don't necessarily just want to fit into one box. So I think that's why I've always kept my mind open. And that's even when it comes to applying to jobs. And I know that my degree is quite specialized, but I never took that as kind of a reason to only apply for jobs in one industry. Because I think, when you're applying for jobs nowadays, it's about so much more than your degree.
Yeah, no, I for sure agree with that. I know I have friends in Australia, and they tell me how when they're applying to law firms or accounting firms, whatever they're going into, their grades that they had in the first year of uni actually have an impact on whether or not they get the job. And I don't know if it's like that where you are, but I know for me, I kind of got the degree and got out, and I was really more of getting my experience and making my connections, and very glad my grades didn't have an impact on that. But it's pretty interesting how it works all over the world. And maybe you kind of touched on this as well. I'm interested in your opinion. I found when I got out of school, I had a marketing degree, and I don't know, maybe sometimes you get out of your degree like, oh, I'm a marketing expert. I have a degree in marketing, I know marketing. And then you actually go do a marketing job. So I went to go work for a hockey startup. And they're like, okay, Chris, do our marketing and get us in front of hockey teams. And then I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do? And they're like, you tell us. And that's when I actually started learning, because it's like trial by fire, right?
Exactly. I think, to be completely honest, unless your dream is to become a lawyer or a doctor, then yes, you need to be very specialized. You need years and years of education and training. But with things like marketing, you really don't need the degree. And if anything, I think it's more interesting people who are coming from completely different backgrounds to get into this field, because then they're bringing a different point of view, a different perspective. And to be honest, you just learn on the job. Like Insights, my first role at Nike, it's all about people. You need to be able to speak to people. It's not about having a degree in research or data, or it's really about understanding people, knowing what questions to ask, and being able to identify those opportunities in the people or the places that you at least expect. So I think, yeah, it's all about learning as you go, and you're gonna make so many mistakes, but you're gonna learn from them.
No, for sure. I absolutely agree with that, because there's one time when I was in school, and I'll never forget this. It was maybe a business elective, and it was an easy project. We easily would have gotten A minus, whatever. That's a good grade, and we can move on from that. But I had a girl in my my project, and then she's like, "We need an A plus," and I'm like, I don't know about that. And then she was like, "Yeah, like we need it." And then the amount of work that she did, because she absolutely needed it, she basically stayed up all night because she wanted her part to be amazing. And then every time I ever saw her throughout the remaining 4 years, she always just looked tired, unhappy, and all that. And I noticed, like, when we were interacting, her social skills kind of lacked, right? Because she was so focused on getting those good grades. And I noticed this in various students as well. And then let's say we'd go to a networking event. I see those, I don't want to generalize, but I see those exact students kind of maybe cornered off. And then maybe someone like myself who did the work, did it well, but kind of moved on from that and kind of put more on the experiences and the connections, I was able to go talk to the directors right away. And then actually, to this day, had a huge impact for me. And I'm sure maybe that's something that's where you're touching on, right?
100%. I think you're absolutely right, because if you're looking at, for example, what we do, which is marketing, it's about storytelling. So obviously you'll remember the people who get their story across the best. And I think it's great to know that, oh, you've gotten these grades, you've got all these accolades, but really it's what's your story, and are you a curious person? Because I think that's really what it comes down to. And actually, one of my best friends at Nike, he never went to uni. He started as a what we call store athlete, so someone working in retail, and he has all the knowledge. He's the one who's been on the ground, interacting with all our consumers for years, and now he's in an amazing position because that's what makes him unique. It's not his degree, it's not the grades that he got.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can for sure agree with that. And I know when I was going through the interview process a couple of years ago, there's some companies that even said you have to start as like a sales clerk, like at their storefront, and then they only hire from within, and that's how they grow. So people actually know how they operate at the base level. So that I definitely see the importance in that. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, just kind of going back to when you're at, you got your job at MTV, was that just from applying? Because obviously with COVID and the pandemic, a lot of people listening are probably a younger demographic, and they're probably going through the situation now, especially with graduation just finishing here. Did you just apply on LinkedIn? Did you have maybe some type of connection? How did that go about?
So absolutely no connection. It was just me being just searching LinkedIn, all websites for jobs, and I applied for it. But what I really liked about the MTV application is they didn't even ask for a CV. It was really about so they had a few questions like, name the best concert you've ever had and why it was the best. Name an artist that you currently have your eyes on that is not yet known. Just relevant questions to the job, and looking at your knowledge and how you express yourself. So that's how I applied. Obviously, a CV was optional, so I attached my CV, but I didn't have experience in the music industry. It was just my passion of music. Typed it all out. Then I got invited for the interview, and yeah, I found out that I think 700 people had applied for that role.
Wow.
But yeah, again, in the interview, I was just being myself. I honestly, that's the only thing I can say is whenever you're in an interview, just be yourself. And even if you don't have the experience, if you're passionate about what you're being interviewed for, it will come across.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Where even kind of going back to it, since I graduated, the only positions I ever gotten was never through an actual interview process. Obviously, I got interviews, but all the ones that I got were actually from people I met, right? Or the startup job that I was talking about. One of my professors referred me to a business that he knew because they're like, I want someone who's passionate about sports marketing, and they're like, this is your guy. So then that's how that developed, and then for better or for worse, when I got the soccer team job, I actually DM'd the owner of the club, and I'm like, hey, you don't know me yet, but I'm like, you're gonna know me real soon, and a little cocky maybe, but it ended up working out, and I joined them a few months later, and that's how everything kind of came about. And the one interview that did well for me, I was just making jokes because I knew some of them and just went about it, and they're like, oh, like we love you, just pandemic hit. But I for sure agree with that, where
you just have to own your story. I think that's another thing, is sometimes people kind of want to fit into the box that they think the interview or the person who's looking to hire is looking for. So, but I think if you just own your story, like if you're a funny guy, get that across, because then they're going to know we're going to hire someone into the team who will crack jokes. Or if you have maybe like a niche skill, or maybe something, something that's different. Like, for example, for me, like I have just this random story of having grown up in 7 countries and like speaking 3 languages. And I know that I'm very lucky to have that. So bring it across. And I think, and if you're also humble about it, and, just show that you are willing to learn, as long as they know you're willing to learn, you're all good. Like I recently was hiring 2 interns for our team. And it's really the ones that really stood out to me were the ones who had passion, and who were themselves and who could be honest. For example, it was, I said, good morning, how are you doing? How was your weekend? And one of them was just honest, like, I didn't have the best weekend. And I really respected that. You want someone on your team who's honest.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, right? Because let's say you paint yourself as some image or this perfect person. That's pretty easy to crack, I find, just from a couple of questions. And then what are you going to do 6 months in? Are you still going to be acting? Like even the best, Tom Cruise can't act for 6 months, right?
Exactly.
So obviously there's things like
also when you're interviewing, like I think people tend to over-prepare and overthink all the questions. So one of the questions was like, if you're a vegetable, what vegetable you be? And some people it's just to see how would you react. Like if you just have the most fucking random question, and Chris, what vegetable would you be?
I don't know. I was trying to think about that just quickly. I really like Brussels sprouts, surprisingly. Roasted, I find they're amazing. I'm going to make some right after this. But, that's a tough question.
See, but it's just like, how can you handle it? It's not even about the answer. It's just about how do you handle it? Some people
it's not even how I handle it. I'm actually curious, like, if I were to define as a vegetable, maybe carrot.
And you would expect it, like, going for an interview at Nike, you're like, oh.
Yeah. Like orange, the boxes of orange, carrots, I love it. What's your answer? What's your go-to answer for vegetable?
Sweet potato. Because
that's not a vegetable.
Well, that's the conversation. It's a sweet potato.
No, my nutritionist would have disagreed with that answer, but that's besides the point.
We can start a debate.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's actually a good question. Maybe I took my notes for my next interview when someone comes on board.
Throw someone off, because people are coming to a sport podcast or like a job interview so serious. So we're gonna talk about sports. We're gonna talk about my skills, my experience. But it's like sometimes expect the unexpected, I guess.
Yeah, no.
The industry, as we know from this past year, everything that's gone down in sports, expect the unexpected.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. And to be honest, that's something with like my team, me and the 2 guys I have on board. When they first came on, obviously I knew them from other experiences, and that's how they reached out to me. But at the beginning, they're all done up, hair slicked back. And I'm like, hey, guys, just settle down, like, be yourselves. And then now, like, yesterday we had a meeting, and one of them said, like, a phrase. I'm like, I don't know what that means, but I like it. Like, start using that more. And now everyone's just chilling themselves, and I find the ideas we have are way better. But kind of pushing that aside a bit, I still wanted to touch on one thing that you just said. You said your best concert. I was curious about that. What was it? What was the answer for MTV?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Your best concert? You said that was part of your interview process?
Okay, yeah, okay. So it was super maybe unexpected and maybe uncool, but I was like, oh, Coldplay.
Oh, I love Coldplay.
When I was like 16 or something, because they came to my the place where I lived at the time, which is like not many people come to,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a huge like concert, and it was just magical. I can't explain why or how. I'm not even usually into that kind of music, but I think that's what blew me away. Is I wasn't expecting much, but I was open to it, and I went there, and they absolutely blew me away with the production, with the song choices, and it made me feel something. So Coldplay of all people.
I enjoy Coldplay. I don't know if that's a bad thing, but I like Coldplay. No, it's pretty interesting, and I think that kind of transitioned well, right? You're talking about storytelling, and I know that's a big part of it. Where I even like purchased a course the other day on how to storytell, but actually from a content side of view, because I think that's going to be a huge thing going forward. So I was curious, maybe you can kind of dive into your position at MTV. What was that like? Did you get involved in storytelling and the come up of artists, or what was that like?
Yeah, so I think it really was all about storytelling, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe about the artists and their music, number one, and number two, storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was in the team called Talent and Music, and it was really, first of all, about so in the music industry, all the big players kind of come up with a weekly playlist. So you'll have all the radios will come up with their weekly playlist. So that's what we did every week. We would pick like 10 songs that would be, what we are vibing with that week.
Mm-hmm.
And this was all UK based. So like my area of specialty was more like the rap, the like R&B, drill, grime, all that stuff. So we picked that out, and then we would also do a lot of shoots with artists, so make content for our digital channels as well as broadcasts. So what I really did was I would look up all these artists, their music, and also other content they've done, and kind of get a feel for their personality. And based on that, we would work with the production teams to, build a piece of content that's really tailored to them. But it would be really fun. So we'd play games, or it would be just fun, quick fire interviews. So it was really about thinking of, okay, if you're the viewer, what would you want to see from your favorite artist? Or if you don't know the artist yet, how can we bring their story across?
Mm-hmm. No, that's pretty interesting. And do you have any like maybe points in time that kind of stood out? Whether it was a specific band or a specific game or anything that kind of stands out to you?
So actually Pop Smoke, rest his soul, a few days before he passed away, he was in London. And because he was really big in the UK, he had a lot of connections to the UK. So he was coming to promote like his upcoming album, and he was kind of teasing at in the future he would have like this big project with all UK artists.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really special. We got to shoot content with him, and I begged my manager, like, I love Pop Smoke. Can I please like ask him some questions? She said yes, you can. So it was like the first time I got to speak to one of the artists myself. So that was really, really amazing. Unfortunately, a few days later he passed away, so couldn't ever use that content. But yeah, really, I don't think I'll ever be able to forget meeting Pop Smoke. And really when he was about to, make it big.
Mm-hmm. So were you on air as well if you're interviewing artists?
So we had different types of content. So for the on-air stuff, we had like our hosts who are TV personalities themselves, and I got to interview him for our editorial, so for the website stuff. But I really, really enjoyed just having a few minutes to speak to him for that.
For sure. No, that's amazing, and I'm sure that's something that you're never going to forget.
Have you ever met anyone that you're like, damn, I can't believe I'm meeting them?
I don't think so. I've met some interesting people like popes, kings, um, but no, I was pretty young, so nothing like really stood out. Nelly Furtado when I was 5 said I was cute, so you know it's on my LinkedIn.
You're sorted for life. That's you.
Yeah,
That's your what's it, like your. You've always got a fact now.
yeah,
And I love Nelly Furtado. Her music, even now.
Maneater. That was about me. Yeah, she saw a cute 5-year-old, and that's how it went about. It's actually in my CV as well. So top line. That's how I got on
in your bio,
everywhere. I actually have it tattooed on my back. Yeah.
Let's roll though.
No, but I don't know. I don't find I get starstruck per se. Is there anyone if you saw like right now, like walking through when you're at MTV or even now at Nike, if someone like walked by you, is there something where like
honestly, no. There's a lot of people I really admire and respect, but I wouldn't be like,
Yeah, I'm the same.
Like in Insights, I spoke to a few big athletes, I guess you would say, but they're honestly, that's the whole point is they're just humans.
Yeah, no.
I guess the more like, because I work with so many artists and athletes, and at the end of the day, they're just humans and they get hungry and they're moody sometimes because they're tired. So no point getting struck.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I guess now kind of moving to your position at Nike, I actually have one specific question and then we can kind of go what that like role entails because I'm sure people listening really want to know what it's like working at Nike. You kind of touched on briefly earlier the pulse of athletes and consumers, so you know what they're thinking. What is the pulse? Can you share that? Can you maybe like what's the pulse of the athlete in 2021? What's the pulse you have?
So, and the main thing is they are humans. Like I just said, they are humans and they don't want to be necessarily put on a pedestal and they want to be seen as more than an athlete. It's like all these conversations you've been seeing around, for example, Naomi Osaka, who stepped away from, doing press and media. I think that's what it comes down to is they are humans and they don't necessarily feel like, always being put in the spotlight, always trying to put their best foot forward. And they also want to, it's all about doing more than just the sport, and that's what consumers want as well. They don't want to just see the athletes at their best moments, The consumers want to know that the athletes are humans and athletes want to be shown as humans and they have different sides. They're not just performers. They also are passionate about, music or about fashion or like Marcus Rashford, he's been doing so much outside of the sport. So I think it's all about humanizing athletes, sports, and our consumers, and so that they can connect more.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's exactly what we do at my company, where it's basically trying to grow an athlete's brand away from the field, right? Because everyone knows them as, a soccer player, a hockey player, whatever type of athlete. But they can do more than, kick a ball, shoot a puck really hard, or, do some circles on ice, right? So that's what we're really trying to push. And even though I find athletes say that they want that as well, and they do deep down, I find sometimes it's hard, right? Because that's what's been ingrained in them for such a long time. And what kind of sucks, I guess, is they kind of learn in a tough fashion, I'd say, right? When they don't start or they get injured, right? And that's when or even with the pandemic, I'd say, because some of the teams here haven't played in front of fans in 2 seasons, I think it is. So that's when it's hitting where, oh, wow, like this sports career will end one day. And then my true self, like whatever I'm interested in, that's what it's going to be for the rest of my life. And maybe you're right. Like I do need to work on that. So I definitely see that having a huge impact in 2021 and going on. And then I guess kind of diving into your position at Nike, what's it like? I know you just do everything via Zoom now, but that's still working at Nike. So what's that been like?
So I think I can't give you an answer that would answer every Nike employee's. No one would have the same answer because it's also so different depending on what you do within Nike. And I've done 2 completely different roles within the company. So it's very different, but I would say if you're in marketing for Nike, it's insane. It's nonstop. It's so exciting, so dynamic. You're just like, you have to have your finger on the pulse, you know? But it's so fulfilling and rewarding, especially the team I'm in. It's a very new team, so we're all learning on the go, which makes it so much more exciting. And it's a company that is obviously, always trying to push forward, push the button. So it gives you more freedom to kind of bring in your new ideas and see where it goes. But yeah, I would definitely say it's nonstop.
Yeah, no, I could imagine. No, that definitely sounds cool, and very curious to see what kind of projects you work on next. And I guess kind of maybe moving away from your career, because that's something we have talked about, right? More about the person a bit. I guess maybe the first thing is you're touching on how, whether it's in interviews or, making connections with people, you're saying, what's your story? So what is your story beyond this, professional career, right? I know you said you speak 3 languages. What are those 3 languages? And what are those 7 countries you've lived in?
Yeah, so it's really I think no matter how many times I get asked, I'm always trying to think, okay, what side of the story do I tell? How much of it do I tell? But okay, so I'm half Dutch, half Iranian, but I was born in Turkey, and I grew up in Thailand, South Africa, Bosnia Herzegovina, France, the Netherlands. I'm definitely forgetting a few. Always happens. But yeah, in all those countries, I randomly went to French schools. So grew up in a very French environment, and honestly, I was just very lucky to see a lot of the world, and to also kind of, wherever I live, just be curious about the culture and kind of try my best to integrate all the cultures. So you definitely pick up a lot about people, but also, for example, about sports in different countries. And okay, in some countries, girls can't really play these sports, or in some countries, this sport is not popular at all. In some countries, this sport is really popular. Same with music, because I've always loved music. Okay, in this country, like, this artist is really popping off this kind of music. So I think just being lucky enough to have that upbringing made me really, really curious. And I try to apply that honestly to everything, especially to people. So yeah, that's a bit of my story. But what is your story?
I guess that's a fair question. Born and raised in Canada, but I'm 100% Portuguese. So the blood and the mustache are not Canadian. So my parents actually come from the Azores, so small islands in the middle of the Atlantic. Canadians probably don't know, but I'm sure people in Europe do. They moved here when they were small. I grew up here. My grandparents and everyone, maybe beyond the age of 60, 70, don't speak any English or French. So I speak Portuguese as well. And yeah, traveled around, lived in Boston for a year. And like you're saying, picking up on things, whether it's culturally or sports, even though Boston's only maybe 8 hours south of where I'm living now by car, huge difference. I was shocked, and definitely learned a lot about people and sports there. And very interesting that I think I'll always keep those experiences as I grow up. And came back to Ottawa, went to school here, and kind of dove into sports, but been traveling and going around, and maybe not the same in-depth knowledge about different cultures as you, since you've lived in so many different places. But I like to think I've been to a few spots as well. But no, I'm pretty passionate as well, and that's where the business kind of ties in, and living my dreams. And as dark as it sounds, whenever someone asks me for advice, my biggest thing is, hey, we're going to die one day. And that's kind of the essence and the perspective I have for my business, where if I'm going to die in 7 years, hopefully, I want to make sure every moment is worth it, right? So obviously my passion is sports marketing, but there's so many different things. And I think you touched on this as well, that life is so much more than, just sports marketing or just this and that. So I'd like to find ways to push those passions into sports, right? Whether it's working with artists and then putting their music over top content and then have them both increase their profiles, or even getting to new businesses and using these athletes to kind of develop their skill set beyond sport in those areas. So that's kind of my quick little rundown of my story. But yeah.
No, I love that. Like, I love that point you bring up about, everyone has different sides to them and different interests. So why not bring those other sides to, whatever your area of focus is, or the industry you're in. So like you said about bringing music or artists to sports, I think that's really what it's all about. Is, for example, you could have someone at Nike who studied political sciences, then they'd obviously be very aware of, different socio-political situations in different countries, and that's really important because that obviously touches on sports and access to sports. So I think that's the beauty of it, and that's the beauty of a company like Nike, is they're not just looking at people who have a sports background. There's some people in the company who only started doing sports when they joined Nike, and I think that is the beauty of it, to be honest.
No, I completely agree, and I think I like to try to represent that as well in my company, where I think, I don't know his exact degree because I didn't ask for proof or even look into a CV, but I think he got a degree in history, and his marketing ideas are unreal. And I even had like a conversation about him last week because he was doing more like sponsorship stuff. I'm like, hey, do you want to maybe push more on the marketing side? Because your ideas, like I could use you in some of my meetings. So it doesn't, like you're saying, and that's what maybe the theme of this podcast is. It doesn't really, matter what background or degree you have. Get yourself in the door and make some noise, right? So
and own your story. I think that's the biggest thing. Is I was working with some people, like this amazing group of women, and some of them are refugees. We like to call them newcomers. And they're refugees and newcomers in the Netherlands, and they have amazing stories. Like, some of them have, been thrown in prison in their home countries. They've had to escape. They've gone through all these things, and these are dark stories, but they have made them who they are, and no one else has that story. Really, no one does. So I think if people can just own their story more, I think that could make such a huge difference. To be honest.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Whether it's especially brands or even people on social media, right? They're always trying to paint this specific image, but you don't always have the perfect picture of your dog or the perfect little ice cream sundae, right? Or even, to be honest, my business, I'll even say, right? People message me and they're like, oh man, can't believe you're doing this and that. But no one ever sees, the ups and downs where, maybe a month ago I was like, oh, you know what, I think I'm going to go see if they're hiring still for a sponsorship job, because you know what, that would be easier than actually having to, do this work and build it up myself. But then the day after you have a great meeting, you're like, oh, you know what, no, this is what I love doing, right? So people never really see the ups and downs.
100%. Yeah, it's like it's amazing working at Nike, but it's tough to get into the job. Oh my God. The journey to get into the marketing job was tough, especially from home. Like, you can't really build the connections. You don't really know the people. So it's all just people are basing you off of who you are on Zoom and the work they've seen from you via email or whatever. So it's fucking tough, and even when you're in it, like, it's your dream job, but it's challenging as well.
No, I completely.
You're like, oh my God, like, it's like the imposter syndrome. I think I've had that so much. I think probably you as well. Sometimes I'm just like, why the fuck am I here? Like,
no, yeah.
What am I doing? I don't know. But then other days you'll have really good days. You're like, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. But for honestly, on the real, sometimes I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, what am I actually doing?
No, I agree. And I think COVID and the pandemic and has really kind of, I speak about this with my friends all the time, where it's kind of a weird timing, right? Because maybe before the pandemic, you're still a student, you're doing this and that, you're maybe still messing around a bit. And then, now we're going to be leaving the pandemic, hopefully going back to normal. And then my friends and I, now we're in our, our mid-20s. My little cousin, 18-year-olds in first years in university, we're not cool anymore. You know what I mean? Now you're officially an adult. Like, oh, you're supposed to have like your shit straight, right?
Yeah.
And in reality, you're always figuring it out, right? And I don't think anyone ever really knows what they're doing. You're just figuring it out as you go, right?
Yeah.
And
exactly. I guess like to anyone who's like trying to look for a job, and if you see like people who are already in jobs at these big companies and think they've got it all together, oh no, no.
yeah,
I don't know what's going on half the time, but I just go with it, you know?
Yeah.
Just roll with it, see what happens.
Yeah, and one of the last things I'll say before you kind of narrow it out into the last two questions I kind of ask everyone is, 'cause I was speaking with someone the other day, and I know a lot of people listening, they're like, oh, I want to go work for the Yankees, you know, Barcelona, Real Madrid, whatever. They think of these huge Nike, right? They think of these huge companies and like, I want to work there. But oftentimes, as I did, you kind of get into these, you know, sports teams or that dream job you had in mind. You're going to be working 60 hours a week, and you're going to go to games on weekends. And it sounds cool, but when you realize, you know, not that pays everything, but the pay you're getting for those hours and that time, that's your life. So if you want to go traveling, you know, have a white picket fence, wife, kids, whatever, that's a little difficult, right? So that's kind of the weird thing about
all consuming, honestly, 24/7. I mean, it's also up to you to set those boundaries, and everyone always gives the advice like, you're just starting, set your boundaries now, blah, 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 blah. But it's hard to. I'll be honest, like sometimes I know I should be saying no, but you want to prove it maybe to yourself and to those around you who've been there for ages, and you're the youngest in the company. You're like, oh, I need to prove myself. So it's really a tricky thing. It's hard to find that balance, especially when you just start, to be honest.
No, absolutely. And I experienced that with my company in regards to the athletes, right? Where, you know, sometimes I'll get a text at midnight and I should be falling asleep, but I'm not asleep yet. And I see text on my phone. I'm like, I don't like seeing this red dot. Like, I should just answer it.
Yeah, I can imagine when it's your own business, you're just like, I need to do it now, like, because it's your business, it's your name, it's your reputation. You just want to be known as, you know, the guy who's like on it, who will respond. But also sometimes it's okay to just not.
Yeah. No, I get that for sure. I guess kind of flowing it out into the end portion of this. I have two questions I ask everyone, I'd say. The first one, I like to say, I know I'm going to go to 103 years old. I've said that since I was a kid. I'm living till 103. And when I'm in that rocking chair, you know, I'm going to have different stories and experiences in mind. What is the one story so far, whether it's from work or life, whatever, that's going to stand out to you, right? We're going to be like just rocking in your chair. I'm like, wow, I can't believe I did that.
I don't think it would be something like big and mind-blowing, to be honest. I'm not even probably career-related. I think one of my favorite moments in this world was randomly being in Hong Kong at Victoria Peak at night with my twin, who's like my favorite person in the world. Something, it doesn't have to do with work or anything. I wasn't thinking about work. I wasn't thinking about money, bills. Just there with my twin, my favorite person, who has been with me since day one, and just we were randomly both in Hong Kong having the time of our lives. So honestly, sorry if it's a boring answer, but
no.
To me, it's the little moments that I will always remember. I don't have it on camera, didn't share it on Instagram, but it's in here, you know?
No, that's amazing. And, you know, literally since day one, right? And I agree with that, where I find even if I go to events or we have things with friends, I'll be yelling at people. I'm like, put your phone away, like just chill, right? But no, that's amazing.
To be honest, the moment I got the phone call where my manager was like, yeah, you've got the marketing job. And I did know it was coming. I honestly didn't believe it. So obviously you never forget those moments. But what's yours? You probably said this before, but what's yours?
I haven't. I don't know. That's weird. I ask these questions and I don't even have an answer.
You're 103 years old. You're on your rocking chair. Maybe it's electric because we're in the year, I don't know what,
Oh, I
I
hope
like
not. I like the wooden ones. There's one in my grandma's house that's just perfect.
hold on to that.
Yeah, I don't know. I do not know. I don't know. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe career related is maybe kind of when I first started the podcast, because I actually used to be in accounting, and I was in second year, and they offered me a full-time position once I graduated, and accounting's decent pay compared to sports marketing. And as soon as they offered it to me, like a flash in my before me, and I was like, oh hell no, like get me out of here. So I actually quit the next day, and then I'm like, I'm completely changing fields, and I'm doing what I love, because the money isn't like what's going to drive me. And it kind of just shocked me because 20 years growing up, I used to make so much jokes. I'm like, oh, I want money. And then as soon as I was like 19 at the time, and it hit me, and I was like, that's not what matters. And then I think that's like the one moment that's going to stick with me, where I think things change, where I have a different perspective since then. But I think
I love that.
that was an interesting moment for sure.
I love
Yeah.
that.
And then the last question is, if you could go back a few years, back way more years, or even just talk to maybe a class of undergraduate students or first year students, and give them advice. It doesn't even need to be career advice, but what is something that you would say, right? Because I'm going to write this down and use it as well for my life.
I think honestly, it's so simple, and it's what I've been saying this whole time I've been speaking to you, is own your story, and also work on yourself as a person. Because when you strip away your job title, what you do, like, who are you as a person? And like, do you know who you are? I think a lot of people kind of struggle to answer that without being like, oh, I'm so and so and I work for Nike. But it's like, okay, if you take that away, what's your story?
That's huge, because I think one of the biggest things I find important, whether it's with friends, family, or even like people you're going to work with, the ability to be self-aware, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's, hey, I actually can't take this project on right now, I don't have enough time,
Yeah.
or hey,
Or I'm going through something I can't emotionally, or like I can't handle this right now. Like, just being self-aware and honest about being honest about what you're going through, you will connect with people much easier, and I think you'll gain respect. Like, if you tell your manager, listen, this is what's going on, this is what I am able to do right now, this is what I'm not able to do right now, please hear me out, I'm working on it, I'll be able to handle more in the future, I just need to handle some things now. Then you just gain respect when you set those boundaries and when you're honest. And I'm honestly working on it. I can have a lot of work to do, but yeah, it's just something I've been thinking more about, is if you take my job title away, if you take all of it away, like, okay, who am I and what am I doing for those around me and for myself, I guess.
No, that's like a very good question. Like I had that moment, like that moment I was talking about with accounting, and I was actually struggling with the concussion, post-concussion syndrome. So it was like pretty bad. And I noticed I kind of got so far away from myself, because the concussions, you get, kind of sad and all that different stuff. And eventually, hey, like, what am I, right? And then you kind of just going through all the different thought processes, because, in my kindergarten yearbook, it said soccer player or accountant. I went through my whole life thinking that way. And then I finally realized, oh, well, first off, I'm not a soccer player. We can see this here. But I'm also not going to be an accountant. And that's when I went through that whole process of like, okay, like, who is Chris if it's not going to be an accountant or an athlete, right? And then that's definitely a great piece of advice, that, work on yourself, and, know your story. I think is a big thing, right?
I think, one of the greatest quotes, know yourself, know thyself. It's very hard. It's a journey. And I think that's the beauty of it, is the football career will end, but the journey of knowing yourself will never end.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I didn't know that quote, but great minds think alike, apparently. No, that's amazing. Is there anything else you'd like to share, ask, point out, yell? I don't know. Is there anything that kind of you want to share?
I guess only one thing that comes to mind is because I was speaking to a friend of mine today, and
Mhm.
this is actually a Drake quote because we had like a marketing call and like Drake showed up at the end and he was like, with the quote that stuck out to me of what he said to all of us was sometimes you, sometimes me, always us. So I think what that really comes down to is we are a team, and it doesn't matter, like, it's not about, you know, you've done this work and you've done this work for this team, but it's us as a team, you know?
Mhm.
You bring what you bring to the table and I bring what I bring to the table. And sometimes it's you doing more work, sometimes it's me doing more work, but it's always us.
No, yeah, no, that's a great quote because I know even sometimes whether it's work or life, you're like, hey, I actually did the dishes last, or hey, I cleaned the floor last, or hey, I did this project last, and it's almost just always comparing. In reality, just do your stuff, and eventually, you guys are working together. So
We're like
that's a
this
great.
one time. It's you and it's me, and that's the way this
Mhm.
works. That's the only way this could work. It's the togetherness. I think he was speaking on togetherness, and it
Mhm.
just really stood out to me that it is always us, you know, even though sometimes someone contributes more, or sometimes more about the other person, but it's always us.
No, absolutely. Well, I guess this is our podcast. I'll see you again next week. But yeah, that was a great way to kind of end the episode. And thank you for coming on. It was great chatting with you.
Thanks for having me. This was very random, but enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.